who should have repped Jesus, but he didn't. Okay? So tell me everything. I need the mic again. Tell me everything you guys know about Moses. Right? Because we've always heard the story of Moses. Jonathan, what do you know about Moses? Also, I can't walk that far.
He was a slave, and then...
Was he a slave? He was a baby.
Oh yeah, he was a baby in a little raft thing, and he got pushed down the river, and he was found by the Pharaoh's wife, and then her daughter, or one of the female daughters.
Pharaoh's daughter, yeah. So he was a baby, born in a time where they were supposed to kill the Israelite babies, and so his mom protected him, put him in a raft, and shipped him down a river. And the Nile has crocodiles, guys. Okay, scary. Okay, yeah.
So he grew up as a prince because the Pharaoh's daughter found him and kept him, and then he ran away because he killed a Egyptian worker person, and then he was distrusting of God when he asked him to go rescue the people because he thought he was capable of doing it.
It's true. That's a good point. So Moses grew up as a prince in Egypt. There's a movie called Prince of Egypt. That's about him, right? So he grew up as a prince in Egypt. He grew up and he eventually killed a man, which is bad, right? So he killed a guy and he ran away because he thought that he was going to be killed for killing someone. And then he spends 40 years in the desert. Okay? What happens next? What brings him back to God? Do you guys know? Someone hasn't answered yet? It's okay if you don't know. What brings him back to Egypt? He talked to a burning bush. He goes up on this mountain, he sees this bush, and this bush starts talking to him. Super weird. Imagine if a saguaro started talking to you. You'd be like, do I need to drink more water? Am I dehydrated? What's going on? Okay, so he sees this burning bush. He goes back to Egypt, right? Let's go ahead and put up our next slide. If you guys want to follow along today, it's on the Bible app, and it's also, there's a link that we're going to put up. Candy, will you put the next slide up? Yeah, okay. So it goes back to Egypt. There's these 10 plagues, right? Pharaoh says, let my people go. Pharaoh says, no, there's 10 plagues. And then, let's go to our next slide, actually. And then, Pharaoh lets his people go, right? So this is our summary, right? Hashtag baby in a basket, hashtag what's up queen, hashtag grew up, hashtag killed a man, hashtag sorry God, hashtag beep beep sheep, because he was a shepherd, hashtag burn a bush, hashtag whoa, hashtag LMPGO, you know what that stands for? Let my people go. And he says, Pharaoh says no, hashtag 10 plagues, then says hashtag Pharaoh says go, hashtag desert. So they wander in the desert for 40 years, and hashtag promised land, what's the last one say? Hashtag complaining. And after that, it's supposed to say hashtag wandering, hashtag promised land, hashtag note. Do you know why? Because Moses did all these things to serve God. But even Moses didn't follow through on everything God asked him to do. And because of it, he really missed out on something. So here's what's happening as we go to our story. Have you guys ever been on a really long hike? Paul has. Paul, what's the longest hike you've ever been on? 8 miles? Whew. It's amazing. 16 miles? Did you take lots of water with you?
Yeah.
That's probably good. We live in the desert. Yeah. 8-hour hike. Guys, imagine a hike that lasts 40 years. Right? Imagine hiking around, moving around a desert for 40 years. That's what God's people did. And here's what God gave them during that time. He sent them food from heaven, like this bread fell from the sky every single day. He made sure they had water, because they lived in the desert. And what happens if you don't drink water in the desert? Bad stuff, right? We live in the desert. So God provided them with food and water, but every time something went a little bit wrong, they complained. And they didn't just like say, man, this sucks, what are we doing out here? Here's what they said. They said to Moses, why have you brought us here to die? Well, you're not pulling any punches. Why have you brought us here to die? Why is there no fresh organic fruit here? I mean, you're in the desert. I'm sick of this food that God's providing from heaven. I'm sick of it. Why do we have meat? Let's go back to being slaves in Egypt. Like, every time a little something went wrong, just a little bit, or they felt like complaining, like they were right at Moses' door, knocking on it, telling him, why'd you bring us out here again? Now, these are the same people that had seen everything that God did in Egypt. All the 10 plagues, they walked through the middle of a sea, like over a mile on dry land. And the first second they got to complain, they did. Doesn't that sound awful? Imagine being in charge of that hike. No, thank you. So that was going on. The people had been complaining to Moses for years. And then this happens. Moses' sister dies. So the people have been complaining for years and years. So much so that they complained enough and they didn't trust God, so that way when God led them to the promised land, they didn't trust him and they walked away. So that happens. And then Moses' sister dies. Now I imagine he was a little upset by this. Right? So the people complain, his sister dies, he was sick and tired and angry, and he's grieving all of these things. And because he was focused on that, he missed out on what God really wanted for him. So you see, Moses, this great leader whose story that we know so well, he missed out on reaching the land that God had promised him. Like he said, leave Egypt. It'll be great. I'll take you here. It'll be awesome. But he misses out on that. And how does he do it? He hits a rock. Have you guys ever been mad and like punched your locker? You don't have lockers? Okay. But like, he hits a rock. Not a big deal. And God says, okay, you can't go into the promised land anymore. Just like the rest of the people. Can I have some people grab Bibles for us? Really fast. And can someone bring me a Bible? That'd be amazing. Super bright. Just kidding. Thanks. Okay. So our story today, that's the background to our story. Our story today, we're going to be in Numbers chapter 20, which in these Bibles is page 71. Okay? So that's our background, and here's our story for today. Why did Moses not get to do everything God had wanted him to do? It says this, page 71, starting in verse 1 of chapter 20. Okay? It says this, in the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. There Miriam, Moses' sister, died and was buried. Now there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron, who was Moses' brother. They quarreled with Moses and said, if only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Like when God judged everyone else, I wish that I would have just died then. It would be better than living with you right now. Isn't that awful? Have you guys ever said that to your parents? Yeah. I said that to my mom and I felt awful. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, into this desert, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us out of Egypt, where we were slaves, to this terrible together? Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community so that they and their livestock can drink. So take this staff that I've shown that you're the leader, right? That's what that staff was. And take it to the rock and speak to the rock. Water's going to come out of it. It's going to be a miracle. It's going to be great. So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence just as he has commanded him. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock. And Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?" Like, stop complaining. God's doing all these great things. Do we have to bring you water out of the rock for you to stop complaining? Then Moses raised his arm and he struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out and the community and their livestock drank. What did Moses do wrong? You ever following me? Yeah. He struck the rock. And did you hear a little bit of frustration in his voice when he called them rebels? He was upset. He was mourning. And instead of doing what God said to do, which was speak to the rock, he struck the rock. Seems like a really small thing, right? Goes on to say this, "But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." Ooh. Imagine hearing that. That would suck. So here is what Moses did. He was frustrated and he disobeyed God. One. He was frustrated and he disobeyed God. He struck the rock instead of speaking to it. That doesn't sound like such a big thing. But also, Moses took credit for what God was doing. He said, "Must we," speaking of him and his brother, "bring you water from this rock? Will that stop you from complaining?" So he took credit for what God was doing. And he disobeyed God. You see, Moses walked away from what God had wanted him and asked him to do. And he missed out on what God wanted him to do later. Like Moses, God was going to use Moses to lead his people victorious into this land that he had prepared for them. And trust me, it's pretty sweet. Like, I want to go there someday and see it. Israel. It's like a country again. Like, I want to see Israel so bad. It's supposed to be really cool. And Moses missed out on that because he was frustrated and tired and mourning. And instead of doing what God asked him to do, he did things his own way a little bit. So here's my point with all that. I don't want you guys to miss out on something that God wants for you because you guys were too angry or upset or confused or didn't have enough faith to follow God in the here and now. So that's why I started off with asking, how are you Jesus to your community? How is God asking you to be that? Because you guys have, 11 days left of school? 8 days left of school? I'm so jealous. That's super cool. And you guys have a whole summer off, right? So in those 8 days, how can you be Jesus to your classmates? Because here's the deal, guys. Even if they think you're super weird for that, how many more days are you going to see them this year? 8, right? And then next year, you can continue being Jesus to them. Right? Think about that. I don't want you guys to miss out on your future because you're too scared to follow God in the here and now. So a bit of my story. I graduated college. I was a youth pastor for a year and a half at a church in Sierra Vista. And now I'm an intern under Brian. Do you see that? So I was a youth pastor, and now I'm an intern. And I was scared. It took me about a year to decide to come here and hang out with you guys. Whoa. But I'm so glad that I did. Okay, let me say that part. I'm so glad that I'm here hanging out with you guys. But I was afraid, and so I spent a year not doing ministry because I was afraid to come and be an intern. My own pride was getting in the way a little bit. But I'm so glad I'm here, and I'm so glad I came to meet all of you guys. I love it here. So God has told us that we represent Jesus to the world. And so here's my challenge to you guys. I want you to be bold, be brave, and be Jesus to your community. Hebrews 12 says it this way. Hebrews 11 talks about Moses and how he was faithful to God. In the Hebrews chapter 12 says this, the first 3 verses. Simply says this: therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, talking about Moses, talking about Abraham, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles in our fear and our frustration. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. I don't want you guys to take a wrong turn in your race and end up somewhere that God can still use you, but maybe it wasn't his plan for you. So can we do that? 8 days left of school. How can we be Jesus to our community? And then even going into the summer. What are some thoughts you guys have on that? Like, we can be nice to our bullies. This is where the rubber hits the road. What do you guys think? I have 2 microphones. Hey, really, how can we be Jesus to our community? It's a tough question. Yeah. Be kind to everyone we meet, right? You remember on Wednesday I said this? I said, like when I'm driving, when I get mad at someone, I'm like, oh, that person for whom Jesus died. That doesn't just count during driving, that counts like all the time. So like if I get frustrated at someone, that's still true about them.
You could leave little anonymous notes in people's lockers or backpacks.
You could. That's actually an amazing idea. So think about it this way. Think about you're like too scared to talk to someone. You can just like leave a note that says, God loves you, and I'm praying for you. Like you can get a hall pass and sneak it in there during the during class so no one sees you do it. That'd be amazing. Like do your whole school, get together with 3 people and just stuff them in everyone's lockers and backpacks.
Or somewhere you can serve in elementary ministry.
Ooh. Plug for elementary ministry. All right. You guys should totally serve in elementary ministry. It's a lot of fun. Okay.
So, at my school, me and my friend Jessica, every Friday we make notes, like nice notes, and we put them in the teacher's mailboxes.
It's amazing. What if you put on those notes that I'm praying for you? That's awesome. You guys rock. Grady, what do you got? You're allowed. Just stand up and yell. Forgive people. Who are you going to forgive this week, Grady? Afraid of what? Grady is going to go to his friend and forgive them for saying something really mean to him. Like, and you're going to tell him you forgive him, right? Awesome. We can do this, guys. It's a lot of fun. And it's hard. But if we do this now, imagine where we're going to be, like when we hit high school, when we go to college. We can be Jesus to our communities. So I'm going to pray. Our worship team is going to come back up. It's actually our time also to lead into communion. And so communion is our time to reflect on what God has done for us and to reflect on what He's asking us to do for Him in return. So I'm going to pray. It's around the room. We're going to turn the lights off. You guys can take communion during our song as you want. God, I thank you for today. I thank you for the lessons that we can learn from your word. God, that you've given us our word to learn from. I thank you for these students. God, I thank you for the ways that they're showing Jesus to the community and the way that you're challenging